The future of worker voice is also the future of our democracy. I fundamentally believe that. History has proven that to be true, and it's true in every other industrialized nation. That if there is nothing to balance the power, then the power moves unchecked, and the future of work will be dystopian. If it is we often talk in these conversations about those glorious days where manufacturing jobs throughout, middle America built an American middle class, mostly for white men, which is true. But there were, in fact, those jobs created. Those jobs were not inherently good jobs. If you remember in the beginning of the manufacturing boom, it was immigrants, newly arrived immigrants. It was children working in factories. The conditions were terrible. The pay was terrible. And it was only because people organized and organized for better workplaces that we ended up with the safety net that we are now trying to figure out what the 21st century version of looks like. That we had, 50 to 80 years of a workforce that had a pension, that had, safety standards that were built into law that people had to adhere to, that, had benefits and protections, and that had wage guarantees. None of that was preordained. None of that was true in the beginning of manufacturing. So I believe that just like we made sure children don't work in the factories and that we have weekends, that we can do that for the 21st century. We can figure out what the rules of work are, but it's going to require government, it's going to require industry, and it's going to require some form of worker voice at the table, making sure that is something it's a priority for everyone. It's interesting to think about historians will trace back the beginning of the safety net that employers administer to something called the Treaty of Detroit, which was when the big three automakers sat down with the big three labor unions and agreed that it wasn't going to flow through the government, it was going to flow through employers. And that set the course for what became law and what became the way we think of as an employer-administered work. So it may be that we need a treaty of the Treaty of Silicon Valley or something that says, here's what it looks like for the 21st century. And frankly, I think it's very likely government will play a much bigger role in that, sort of to the question you were asking earlier, is it the platforms or is it government? I think it could be both. It may be that we enter into a moment where we say, actually, if people have individual accounts, it's the government that should support that so that the fluidity in the workforce, can happen, so that we aren't putting all our eggs in one basket like Uber, if Uber is actually going to implode. Like like we've seen over the last few months, that would have been unfathomable to think about even just a few years ago. That may be the best way to protect workers in a very dynamic, changing, labor force.